reasons is we're being compliant with Ofqual's conditions of regulation, which means that when we do these kind of briefing sessions, we have to make them available to attendees and to the wider community. We don't have to force it into them, but we have to make it available. So that's what we're doing. So you are being recorded. If you don't want to be recorded, feel free to drop off. You can watch the recording at a later point in time, and it'll be on our website at some point. Now, up the top here, you have a little button called Q&A. As we go through the session, make a note. If you drop your questions in the Q&A, and I'll collate them and we'll answer those towards the end. That's the plan of action, and we'll get through as many of those as possible. Now, while we're recording it, and the recording will sit on our website in the future, what we're not doing is we're not going to issue any slides out. The slide material is available. It's available on our ACE360 knowledge base site. So if you're already linked with us as a training provider, it's there for you. Go and get it. It's all available to you. So let's start my slides. So a few compliance points. We've based this document on the ST0556 standard. That's the Improvement Leader standard. It doesn't contain any information which smart people couldn't get by going and looking at that assessment plan and looking at how things are done and working it out. So we're not giving you any confidential information. Now, as far as we're aware, information in here applies equally to any assessments carried out by any endpoint assessment organisation, although as far as I'm aware, there are still only 2 of us. Now, our plan for this morning, we've only pitched it in for an hour. That's probably about as much as we can take for this. We'll do a bit of a shameless plug on who we are and what we do and what we're all about. We'll talk about what an improvement leader is. David's going to take us through that. David will review the assessment plan at a high level. We'll talk about the difference between the 2 key elements of the assessment, being the dissertation and the professional discussion. I'll take you through what the dissertation could look like. It's a suggested way of doing it. And then we'll look at the professional discussion as well. There are some tricky parts in the assessment plan, being the assess and create strategy assignments. And David will talk to us about a way of dealing with that. I'll talk to us about a training video, and then we'll deal with any of the Q&As that have come through. We hope that's going to cover everything that people want to know, but of course we are available. Come and chat to us later as well. That's perfectly okay. So a bit about us. We are quite unique in what we do. We've worked in the Lean Six Sigma process improvement niche for, I've been doing it for well over 30 years in one way, shape or form. We're quite unique in that respect. We stick to our knitting. You know, you're not going to find us assessing hairdressing or some of those other standards. Now, other organisations use less well-qualified people, they use less experienced people. All of our team are experienced Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belts, Lean Masters. We have a couple of black belts and green belts have joined us fairly recently. We've all got 10 years or more consulting experience at that senior level. Certification from reputable organisations, that sort of thing. We're not just an assessment house that'll just assess anything. We are management consultants. We specialise in this niche. We are management consultants who also train and assess. We're one of very, very few, actually, I think we're the only provider who is regulated both by Ofsted to train these standards and Ofqual to award the qualification. I'm fairly sure we are the only organisation who fits into both camps. It's a very difficult line to walk, because what that does mean is we have a few candidates we present, so we also have a foot in that camp and we know what's required. You can go and find out what Ofsted said about us because it's in the Ofsted report. But one of the things that we do is, I work with universities around the country, take part in teaching of degrees, research activities, and so on. And that point really here is that what you get from us is that high quality, relevant, the industry standard materials. Lots of other organisations use this. I haven't listed the training providers just by way of maintaining a bit of confidentiality for this group, but these are some of the organisations we work with from a consulting point of view and a training point of view. I could add quite a few more, I just haven't. Now, level 6 assessments are done by the partners, which is myself and David. And that's because the level of experience and skill required is quite a significant level of skill, and it's quite a senior level. So for a level 6, it's me and David as we stand. David's been around for as long as I have. He's been consulting for well over 20 years. He's worked in lots of OPEX fields around the world, training and coaching up to master black belt level. He's particularly in things like manufacturing and pharma. I'm a certified Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt. I started my Lean journey when I was 18 or 19, so I've been at it for quite a while as well. I've been consulting for well over 20 years, mainly in operations areas, but across manufacturing, and lately into public sector, law enforcement, nuclear, healthcare, and so on. So I'm going to turn it over to David and let him talk about Improvement Leader.
Thank you, Mike. So we'll start with a little bit of an introduction. It really shouldn't be necessary to answer the question, what is an improvement leader, given the people that are on the call, but in particular for the benefit of future people who may look at the video on the website, we need to be very clear that this isn't a generic leadership qualification. And we have on a number of occasions had people contact us about doing level 6 training, and the candidates they're talking about are high potential individuals. Great, but they're not black belts, they're not green belts. They're wanting to start from nothing, and that doesn't work, because an improvement leader is someone who is already a black belt or has an equivalent qualification like a level 5 apprenticeship, and will be leading an operational excellence or continuous improvement, whatever you want to call it, deployment. So in that kind of role, you would be setting the overall direction of the deployment, leading a team of black belts, coaching people, training people, providing technical support. It's a leadership role for sure, but it's a leadership role within a specific field, and that is where the improvement leader lands. Next one. So coming to the assessment plan. The assessment plan is a very detailed document. What have we got? 31 pages worth, and it explains the format of the endpoint assessment, which is basically a dissertation, professional discussion. Those are 2 separate meetings that you're going to have, and recording a training video, and we'll get into those in a bit more detail later. So we're going to talk about that shortly. The assessment plan describes what's covered by the dissertation, and there's a lot in it, a lot of individual items. Similarly, what's covered by the professional discussion, and then it gives you 14 pages of really explicit definition of what constitutes a fail, what constitutes a pass, a merit, a distinction, and so on. So any candidate, any training provider needs to have a well dog-eared copy of this assessment plan on their desk, because one of the things that I'm not telling tales out of school is this is the instruction manual for the endpoint assessment organization. and in deciding whether this piece of evidence on, shall we say, voice of the customer meets the requirements. Your assessor, I can guarantee, will be looking at the assessment plan and says, it says this, therefore I want to see this. So the first key message is read the assessment plan carefully, and in preparing a candidate for assessment, look at that and say, right, has my candidate provided that information specifically? Next one. I wanted now to just reflect for a minute on what the job involves. I described with my pyramid slide that an improvement leader is basically as a master black belt. Or another job title might be a continuous improvement deployment leader. To understand how all these assignments, and there are lots of them, how it works, it's helpful to think about, well, what actually is the job of an improvement leader? So this is my best effort at defining what that job role entails. First of all, most importantly, you've got to be delivering benefits for the projects. So you've got to figure out, okay, what are the goals that we need to be achieving, and deliver a set of goals, and then you need to deliver a set of projects that are going to achieve those goals. So that's the first thing. Secondly, it's a leadership role. There will be a team of people of some sort that this person will be leading. It's highly likely that they're going to be delivering training, for example, training black belts, training green belts. It's highly likely, perhaps I should say that a bit more strongly, it's almost certain that they're going to be coaching other practitioners, again, green belts, black belts, or level 4s or level 5s. It's a leadership role that involves leading change, getting stuff done through people. So that's an important part of their job. And finally, it is the highest level qualification in Lean Six Sigma. So you're going to expect that they will have the highest level technical skills. So it's providing that sort of technical leadership help desk, if you like. So this helps us to understand what's involved in the dissertation and what's involved in the professional discussion, because you've got all of these different knowledge and skill elements. I think there's what have we got? A dozen or so knowledge elements and 23 skill elements. Mapping them to the role of an improvement leader will help you to see what this dissertation's really all about. Because whereas the professional discussion is item by item, show me this knowledge, show me this skill, and so on, the dissertation is in our niche unique to the level 6, and so you can see here the blue parts enable you to see, well, it's leading that strategic thrust, it's figuring out what are our goals need to be and making sure that projects get delivered in order to deliver those goals. Training people and leading an operational excellence team all ends up supporting that, because we're wanting to make sure that we deliver what the organization needs us to as an operational excellence team. And that's also going to involve leading change. So this helps us to see what the dissertation is going to cover. It's telling the story of a deployment. It's saying, I have taken either an existing deployment that was struggling and I've lifted it up to a new level, or perhaps I've started in an area where operational excellence wasn't really happening, and I've got it all set up from scratch. Something like that. There will be other circumstances, but that's the typical sort of picture that you're going to see in the dissertation. So I'll hand over to Mike, who will take us through in a little bit more detail what's involved in the dissertation.
I get to come back. So the dissertation element, the point of the dissertation and calling it a dissertation, it's a level 6 qualification, which puts it on par with a first degree in the UK. So it's that level of quality and depth, but it's not the same level of length. There's actually 3 parts, excuse me, to the dissertation. One is the dissertation itself, one is the presentation of it, and the last bit is the questioning on it. So the dissertation, it's a formal document. It's probably written in Word or a similar word processing software rather than a PowerPoint presentation. Now, the main body, between 4,000 and 4,500 words. If you were writing academically, plus or minus 10% is normally permitted. We're not going to get that fussy about it, but in that order. You should include summary and appendices, which are additional to the word count, so they're not included in that. And you need an A3 style summary. So your appendices, they have supporting evidence. That's where you're going to put meeting minutes, extracts from your organizational strategy, your KPIs, risk logs, org charts, all that kind of stuff, which is useful for the assessor to know, but it's not central to your main body. Now, the key here, and I've underlined it, is the dissertation must focus on the development and deployment of an improvement strategy. It's not describing a project you've done. And that's kind of central to the point of the dissertation. Now, the candidate will present that dissertation. So they present a summary of it. So that means that they're not talking through their Word document. They're going to need another document. Now, apprentices can use whatever format they think is appropriate to present it. They can do it on a flip chart. They can do it using PowerPoint. They can use A3 style posters. They can use handouts. They can do any style they think is appropriate to be able to get the key points of the dissertation across. And they've got to do that in between 45 and 50 minutes. So it's a dissertation which is evaluated, the presentation and questioning supports it. Off the back of the presentation, the assessor is going to ask a number of questions to ensure that all of the KSB elements have been covered. And those questions will come from a review of the dissertation, and there may well be 1 or 2 come up as a result of the presentation. Apprentices can use whatever materials they think is appropriate in answering those questions. Now, we've given a suggested structure of the dissertation. I'm going to really stress the point that it's suggested. We're not mandating it because the assessment plan doesn't. This is a way we found which is clear and gets all of the key points across. So start with the title page, just keep it nice and clear. An exec summary to summarize the entire thing, about 300 words. An introduction. What work was done? What's the background? Where is the initial state? What were the benefits that were being looked for? And some of these elements deal with some of the KSB elements. A literature review describes the key models and theories that the work rests on, and it also meets a good number of the knowledge elements. It shows you know strategic models like Hoshin-Kanri, competitiveness, Porter's model, 5 forces, and so on. It shows you understand various continuous improvement approaches, all the way from Lean, Six Sigma through theory of constraints, 8D, and so on. You should cover people-based theories. So that's going to address K3 and S3, and also project management theories. So how does gateway management work? What about Gantt charts? That addresses K6 and S10. You should have a section on aims and objectives. There's a very clear distinction between aims and objectives. So aims are what we're trying to achieve. Objectives are things that define measurable outcomes. They're the steps that were taken to achieve the desired outcome. The methodology shows what the plan was, what actually got done, who took part, what you learned, and what your reflections were. And you're going to address mainly skills elements here. So the bulk of the writing is in literature review and methodology. The literature review is all about the knowledge, and the methodology is all about the skills. In the results, tell us what you achieved, what got done, what were the benefits, and that's going to address K2 and S2. Equally, if things didn't get done, tell us what didn't get done. And then in conclusions, did you actually achieve your end goals and what learning points were there? It's not essential to have been 100% successful, but it is useful for the apprentice to have reflected on that journey and talked about things they may well have done differently. In your appendices and references, appendices are useful background information you want to share with the assessor, but not central to your key point. So supporting evidence, minutes, extracts, all those kinds of things. The appendices are included in the word count, but equally don't hide excess word count there, because what you're saying in the appendix is this is useful, but it's probably not going to be central to the theme. And then references, it's useful to have a list of your reference material. And again, that's not included in the word count. We suggest a layout. You don't have to follow this layout. It's only a suggestion. We think it keeps it nice and tidy if you follow an academic style, where you've got a cover page, an exec summary, then you've got a table of contents, figures and tables, and then you start each new section on a new page. This helps your assessor keep things nice and tidy, and it makes sure your assessor sees all of the key points that the apprentice wishes to share. As I say, it's a suggested layout. It's not a you must do. I'm going to hand it back to David for the professional discussion.
Thanks, Mike. So Mike's taken you through something that's quite unique to ST0556 and given some suggestions. The professional discussion, on the other hand, is much more familiar to training providers who offer the other standards. Level 3, 4 and 5 all have a professional discussion, and this follows a very similar pattern, slightly longer meeting, unsurprisingly, but it's the same basic structure of tell me what you've done and provide me some evidence to show that you haven't completely fabricated what you've said that you've done. So nothing really dramatically different to report here. Very similar to the approach used in the other standards. Next. Now, what is a particular area where people have had some challenges at level 6 is that there are a lot of assignments that contain wording with things like assess the effectiveness of, or make recommendations, or develop a strategy for. And I think it's probably just human nature that people will read something and they might misunderstand it based on what they were really hoping it was going to say. So we wanted to sort of spell this out. Again, this whole slide could be summarized as read the assessment plan. But if you are asked to assess the effectiveness of something, then that's not the same as doing that something. So you've got to think to yourself, you know, what are they asking for an improvement leader to do? And it's reasonable to expect that that's going to be different to what an improvement specialist is being asked to do. They're more likely to be asked to show that they're delivering the work. an improvement leader will also be asked to coach people. So here, it's not just doing the work, it's not just coaching people, it's assessing the effectiveness of the overall process, which fits with this as a leadership role. So we're suggesting here, as Mike's done, that this is a suggestion to help give you a way to start, but it's not the only way to do it, and it doesn't imply that do it in this way and you'll automatically pass, or don't do it this way and you'll automatically fail. Not at all. It's just we're giving you a way of thinking about it. So you're going to take a step back with these type assignments and evaluate how well things are going compared to the needs of the organization you're in. The word assessing seems to me to suggest that you know what you're looking for and you're assessing to see how close you've got to what you want. So how well are the needs of the organization met, and what opportunities can we make for improvement? If the assessment plan says identify opportunities for improvement, then you need to identify opportunities for improvement. If the assessment plan says implement opportunities for improvement, then you need to implement those. You want to take these things very literally. That it might be that something says identify and goes no further, in which case you won't be expected to have implemented everything, but you've got a plan and you're in the process of doing that. Developing a strategy is pretty similar, really, but the idea of developing a strategy suggests that we don't know exactly yet what we want. So as part of that, you're also going to set a goal. You're also going to define what the future state needs to be, as opposed to assessing, which is comparing it to a known standard. So you've got that extra step here at the beginning to say, well, we need to figure out what the organization needs or will need in the future. And then you're going to assess how well your current performance meets those needs and figure out what kind of an action plan you're going to need in order to close that gap. So this is the sort of way you need to be thinking about these types of assignments. There's quite a lot of them. I don't know, about 10, something like that. So you might want to think about using some kind of a standardized approach, a template of some sort. There are maturity assessment templates that are quite popular, especially with management consultants, which gives a consultant standard set of things to evaluate and say, how well does it meet this requirement, and mark them against that and then identify where the key gaps are. So you might find that using some kind of a standardized template helps you. It won't make any difference whether you use a standardized template or not in the assessment, because you're going to be assessed on the quality of the work you've done, not the template. But I'm just suggesting that this could be a way of making your life a little bit easier as a training provider or as an apprentice. Next. Mike, I think you said you were going to pick up the training video.
Yeah, I'm going to pick this up. I've seen there's a couple of questions come in. We'll answer those in the Q&A. We're not going to ignore those. We'll do them all in one go. Now, the training video, it's broadly the same as for the Level 5 Improvement Specialist Standard. Broadly, the interesting thing on the Level 6 assessment plan is that it's not expressly referenced in the KSB elements in the professional discussion or the dissertation. So it's something you have to do. You have to do to a specific level of quality, but it's assessed as a holistic element. So the assessment plan says the portfolio has to include evidence that relates to preparing and delivering a training session. Now, the key bit I've underlined here is with Level 5 learning outcomes. So For me, I would want to be going and looking at the level 5 standard and understanding what those outcomes are for my selected topic. Now, the training session has to cover a subject off the specific list. It can't be anything. We have had candidates at level 5 who've uploaded their training video as evidence of them teaching somebody how to insert a drip, for instance, in a healthcare example, and that's not on the list. So it has to come from that list. The training session, it says that it has to be delivered to a group of level 5 delegates. Now, many candidates won't necessarily have a group of level 5 delegates. Now, as long as it's being delivered to the right outcomes and those people are in a position to be able to use that knowledge, most endpoint assessors will kind of go, that's fine. Your video has to last between 45 and 50 minutes. That doesn't mean that the entire training session has to be 45 to 50 minutes. It just means that that video has to be continuously sampled from a longer session. Or you could do a 50-minute training session. That's entirely up to you. Now, things that go wrong. So training delivery that doesn't have level 5 outcomes. Now, your assessor may well check to and ask, how did you know what the learning outcomes need to be? And that should be fairly clear that the level 5 assessment plan is where to go and look. Apprentices deliver training videos which don't cover one of the subjects off the list. That also happens. Videos aren't long enough. We have had videos for both the level 5 and level 6 submitted that are 30 minutes, 20 minutes. We have had videos submitted which are 10 minutes, then there's a separate video of 20 minutes. It must be continuous. Where you're delivering a training session over Teams or Zoom, over some kind of remote access like this, it makes it harder to do. It's not impossible, but it makes it harder to do because you are expected to use multiple modes of delivery, flip charts, slides, handouts, and so on. So it's worth thinking about how you're going to include that. If you include breakout sessions, and that's fine, you need to record the breakout sessions as well, and the candidate is going to need to be present in some of those breakout sessions to check that learning is happening. Other areas where things go wrong, no delegate feedback provided, no training materials provided, those things have happened. And in a couple of cases at level 5, we've had apprentices delivering the training provider standard slide material. And we know that because it's got their logos on it. That also happens. What it's important to point out is the apprentice doesn't have to be a good trainer. What they do need to do is be able to deliver material that's technically correct. So your assessor will be looking for technical errors, and they do need to deliver that in a logical order. It doesn't need to have pizzazz. It doesn't need to have Hollywood presentation values. That's not important. What's important is the material's technically correct, it's delivered in a logical order, and that learning is shown to take place. That bit's important. Now, we've got some Q&As come through, and I'll give you a moment or two to add Q&As. I'm going to tackle the couple that's come through. So we've shown you a suggested structure for a dissertation. I'm going to bang the drum a bit about it being suggested. There are alternative ways to achieve it. We've presented something which we think is logical and makes life easy. So if candidates, many candidates will have been on this program for 18 months or more, and they may well have started this dissertation some time ago. In our training delivery, we encourage candidates to start the dissertation as early as possible. If they've taken a different approach but met the requirements, that's fine. We're not going to fail a candidate for not following that format, nor if a candidate does follow that format, but the contents aren't very good, nor does that guarantee a pass. We have a question about the concise page, the A3 style, as part of a dissertation. Yes, you can use that to build the presentation of the dissertation around. I'd suggest it probably needs a little bit more content. There's probably a few more slides needed, but starting with A3 as a summary would be a great place to start. Now, is there any more? Yeah, there's some more questions. So are there any particular KSPs that you commonly see apprentices struggle to adequately cover? Yes. Clarify would expect. I can't tell. Dave, do you want to tackle the commonly failed to cover, or do you want me to do that?
I think we can probably both chip in. We see different things.
Go on, you have a few.
I talked about these assess or create a strategy for type assignments. This is a common pitfall where people, as I mentioned, sort of, I think, read what they want to read rather than what's actually written in the assessment plan, and demonstrate that they've used a tool. But demonstrating you've used a tool, if the assessment plan asks for you to demonstrate that you've coached other people who are using the tool, doesn't make the requirement. So read the assessment plan very carefully. That's the main one I wanted to stress on that. Mike, you might have something different.
I was going to echo the same thing. Several of the criteria talk about guide others in, and then there'll be measurement systems analysis or capability analysis. So as David said, just presenting a gauge R&R, okay, we can see you've done some measurement systems analysis, but now show that you've guided somebody in how to do it. So we'd expect to see some evidence of coaching having taken place. You could add work product, you could add witness statements, you can add photographs. There's all sorts of evidence you can add to that. Between the guiding others and between the assess and create strategy, they are the ones we see being done to a lower standard. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say one more thing that occurs to me on this, based on this sort of prompt. We're all used to seeing or hearing people being interviewed on the TV, on the radio, and not answering the question. Politicians, of course, are famous for it. Politicians will answer the question that they want to have been asked rather than the question that was asked, or politicians will hear a question and then make a statement of their policy or their track record or redirect it. Don't try to do that in an endpoint assessment, because the analogy, if I take the radio interview analogy, it would be as if the interviewer is marking you on the quality of your answers after you've had the interview. The fact that you've managed to dodge, as politicians managed to dodge really embarrassing themselves by simply ignoring the question, wouldn't do you much good if the interviewer is the one who's rating you. So you've got to provide the assessor with the evidence that's called for in the assessment plan. And if you try to flannel it and try to sort of smudge the question and give them something that's sort of on the same subject area but not the same, the assessor will ask follow-up questions as far as they can. And once they can go no more, you're going to get marked down on that. So there's no wriggling. Please don't give politicians answers.
Yeah, I'll kind of echo that one a bit. You must answer the question. In our AS360 knowledge base, there is some guidance on how that might be done, in the format style rather you might choose to follow. If your assessor asks you a question, it's because they are looking to see whether you have met the KSB criteria. That's the only reason the question's been asked. And if the answer doesn't directly show how that criteria has been met, then you don't get the appropriate criteria. It's as simple as that. We have another question. Is the expectation for the dissertation to have a specific piece of evidence as an appendix for each case be associated with it? Well, the format we've shown you earlier is a suggested format. You don't have to follow that. You could quite easily write your dissertation that follows the KSB as set out in the assessment plan. And you could quite easily write an element for each KSB. Quite easily do that, and you could quite easily then succeed at the assessment. The key here is making it connect and flow rather than just being here's a bit for that and a bit for that. The expectation is it flows a little bit more. Do you want to add anything to that, David?
Just to say that the answer to the question is sort of yes. Do you need a specific piece of evidence for each KSB? Well, if the answer was no, then that would mean that you could offer something for one of the KSBs with no evidence. So logically, can't be that would be acceptable. It might be that one piece of evidence absolutely slam dunks 2 or 3 different KSBs. I can't think of an immediate example, but then you would say for each of those KSBs, I've got X as a piece of evidence, and that's fine. The main thing is that for everything that you want to, each individual KSB, you're able to write about how you've met that requirement and show evidence to back it up.
Yeah, it's difficult to say certain things are and aren't acceptable, but the dissertation, by virtue of the way the assessment plan describes it, it's expecting a narrative rather than piecemeal pieces. We have another question. So what would you expect to see for promote type criteria or criterion? There's a few in the assessment plan for merit criteria and merit into distinction criteria where they say promote the use of. Do you want to tackle that one, David?
Yeah, the first answer I'm going to give you very clearly is I'm not telling you, because what would you expect to see starts to lead us down the road of what is our specific expectations, and we can't tell you. But is someone promoting something? Well, you've got to ask yourself, is the work that I've done, let's take us for instance here. We've got one of the merit criteria is promote the principles and benefits of statistical modeling to the wider organization. So statistical modeling using regression techniques or forecasting, that sort of thing. So what might you do to promote something? Off the top of my head, I'm going to guess it might be it might be a training session that you run. It might be a workshop. There's many things it could be. Probably having a chat with your boss over lunch about how good it's been to use statistical modeling probably wouldn't kind of cut it as promoting the benefits to the wider organization. I'm sort of deliberately giving an extreme example because I'm not allowed to tell you and to define what the line is. I'm afraid to say that our approach is I know it when I see it. And so if I can look at that and say, yeah, he or she has indeed promoted the benefits of statistical modeling to the wider organization, then of course that will get the credit.
I have seen candidates who have done a little bit of a lecture or a brief for their senior management teams. I've seen candidates who've done lunch and learns on topics. I've seen candidates who've written blog posts on their internal kind of websites. Some places use Yammer and that sort of thing. I have seen candidates who have written experiential, this is what happened, and they've published that as a LinkedIn post or a blog. So there's all sorts of different ways to promote it. Promotion means, I would say, going beyond just doing. But those sorts of things all would fall into the promote kind of category.
And then we're going to say to ourselves, is the amount and quality of that evidence reasonable for a level 6 type qualification?
Do we have any more questions? Let me scroll through all the questions. There's no more questions. We've either been really good or really terrible. I'm not sure which. But any more questions? Any for anyone? We are closing in on the hour we promised you. I'll give you a minute or two to get any final questions in, and if there's no final questions, we'll wrap it up and we'll have a cup of tea. So take a minute, get any final questions in, and then we'll do our closing comments.
While we're waiting, I think it ought to be just mentioned that we have ignored the behaviours out of the KSBs here, purely because there's nothing particularly unusual, different about the behaviours in this standard compared to the others. It's the same things that you'll be familiar with, like drive results, team working, professionalism, and so on. It doesn't mean that we won't assess those, but it just means that there's nothing much particularly to say about them that's different to the others.
Very, very similar to the level 5. The only one worth commenting on is safe working, which I think is B6, where actually the level of evidence required, it just says work safely. It doesn't talk about at level 5, it talks about going a few steps beyond that. So actually they've dialed it down for level 6.
Yeah, the latest one says recognises opportunities to improve safe working practices. So
exactly. So let's see, any more questions? Well, there's no more questions. So we've either done a great job or a terrible job, not sure which. In our AS360 knowledge base, you will find all sorts of guidance. There's not every KSB isn't covered yet. Our intention is that every KSB will be covered. It's not yet. The way we tend to approach it is if we have a couple of training providers have come and asked the same sorts of questions, we'll write some guidance. So there's some guidance slides on the dissertation. There's some guidance slides on the professional discussion. There will be shortly some guidance slides on the video. There's guidance slides on benchmarking. There's some guidance slides on answering the assessor's question. And at different levels, there's different sets of guidance. If you're connected to us as a training provider, you can go and get those. You can have a look at those to your heart's content. So if you've got people on the call, you're not connected to us as a training provider, drop me a note, give me a call. We'll have a chat and we'll get you hooked up with that. Other than that, my final comments, and I'll let David have his final comments. This standard's been around now for getting on for 2 years. We're starting to see the first candidates come through. I think that the last information I had was there's only about a dozen completes across the country so far. Clearly, it's quite a niche standard. So many training providers are finding their way through. So let us help you find your way through. David, anything from you?
I think I just want to ram home the point, read the assessment plan, because your assessor hasn't got some sort of secret extra information that they've been provided that they're not allowed to share. They're just looking at the assessment plan and saying, have they met that? So you can do the same.
Absolutely. Okay, well, with that, any more? Let me just have a look. No more questions? No more questions coming. I'm going to thank you all for your time and attention. It's our first one. We've had a go at it. We'll probably do some more over the coming months. If there's particular topics that you want us to do this kind of thing on, feel free, drop me a note. We'll add it to the list, the ever-growing list of things we've got to do. I believe we've done this in a way which is compliant with our conditions of regulation, beg your pardon, for Ofqual, in that we've made it available to all participants. We've made it available to you whether you are a customer of ours as yet or not. We've made it available to employers, to apprentices, to training providers. So I believe that we've met the conditions. It will be available on the website. So this recording will be available on our website. If you don't know where that is, it's advancedanalyticssolutions.co.uk. We have a part of the web page called articles. There's about half a dozen articles which I or David have written over the last few years, have appeared there, and they cover various topics in improvement activities. Some of them are actually really good reads and are very useful for apprentices looking to think how they might meet some KSPs. So by all means, go over and have a look. And this video will appear up there, presumably when we figure out how to do it. That's when it will appear there. Folks, gentlemen, ladies, thank you very much for your time and attention. I'm going to say goodbye.
Yep. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.